Welcome back, sleepless ones. Tonight, we dive deeper into the shadows of Westeros, where the stories you think you know become something far stranger and more beautiful. What if Lyanna Stark didn't die at the Tower of Joy? What if the dragon has 3 heads means something completely different? What if everything about Azor Ahai is wrong? These aren't just theories, they're revelations that will change how you see every page, every scene, every character in George R.R. Martin's masterpiece. From the crypts beneath Winterfell to the volcanic heart of Dragonstone, from ancient pacts within human forces to the true purpose of the Maesters, we're about to uncover the real Game of Thrones. So settle in, close your eyes, and let these 18 secrets carry you into dreams where ice and fire dance to a song you've never heard before. The wheel Daenerys wants to break has been turning far longer than she knows. The game is older, darker, and more magical than anyone suspects. Let's begin with the theory that changes everything. What if Jon Snow's mother never died? Theory 1. What if Lyanna Stark survived the Tower of Joy? Imagine the scene at the Tower of Joy unfolding differently. Howland Reed, with his knowledge of ancient healing arts passed down from the Crannogman who learned from the Children of the Forest, manages to stem Lyanna's bleeding. She weakly clings to life as Ned defeats Sir Arthur Dayne. When Ned bursts into the tower chamber, he finds not a dying sister, but one recovering slowly, holding a newborn with unmistakable Targaryen features. The consequences would cascade throughout. The 7 Kingdoms. Ned, bound by honor, would protect both mother and child, but couldn't hide Lyanna forever. Robert Baratheon's obsessive love for Lyanna would transform into rage upon discovering her willing elopement with Rhaegar and the birth of their child. The revelation would ignite a schism between houses Stark and Baratheon, the very alliance that secured Robert's throne. Lyanna, fiercely independent like Arya after her, would refuse to denounce her Targaryen child or accept Robert's hand. The North, torn between fealty to the new king and loyalty to their liege lord's family, might have declared independence decades before Robb Stark. House Tully would be pulled between their Stark and Baratheon connections. The Lannisters would likely use the chaos to strengthen their position, perhaps even arranging Robert's untimely death to install Cersei as regent for a young Joffrey. Most significantly, Jon Snow would grow as a prince in hiding rather than a bastard taught from birth about his claim to the Iron Throne. Would he develop the humility and wisdom that his time at the Wall instilled? Or would he become another pawn in the Game of Thrones, raised on dreams of dragonfire and conquest? Without the Vale's unquestioned support through Jon Arryn, and with the North potentially in rebellion, Robert's reign might have collapsed entirely, leaving Westeros fractured into warring kingdoms, a divided land far more vulnerable when the long night finally came. The ripples would extend to Daenerys and Viserys, who might find northern allies rather than exile in Essos. The Night's Watch, without Jon Snow, might fall to the White Walkers before anyone recognized the threat. And the complex web of alliances that defined the War of the 5 Kings would never form, replaced by entirely different conflicts centered around Lyanna's living testimony and her son's claim. Perhaps most fascinating is how Robert Baratheon's character would evolve. His idealized love for Lyanna, the foundation of his rebellion and reign, would shatter upon learning she chose Rhaegar over him. Would he become a more bitter tyrant than Aerys ever was? Or would the blow to his pride drive him into such self-destruction that Tywin Lannister could seize control of the realm far earlier? The armies of the North, traditionally isolationist, might have marched south once again, not to overthrow a mad king, but to protect the son of their liege lord's sister, and the remaining Targaryen loyalists, scattered but not destroyed, would rally to the child they'd see as their rightful king. In this world, the Game of Thrones would take a darker, turn far sooner, the delicate peace established after Robert's rebellion would never solidify, denying the realm those few prosperous years under Jon Arryn's careful management as Hand. Instead, the Seven Kingdoms would remain in perpetual conflict, each generation fighting over the same ground, claiming the same thrones, spilling the same blood. Theory 2. The dragon has three heads, a trinity of magical forces. The world of ice and fire exists in perpetual imbalance. The cyclic nature of its long summers and winters, of dragons rising and falling, of civilization flourishing then collapsing beneath eldritch threats, suggests a cosmic pendulum swinging between extremes. What if this instability stems from the separation of three primordial magical forces that once existed in harmony? The first force is ice, stark, preserving, memory-keeping, represented by the others and their necromancy, but also by the ancient power in stark blood that allowed them to rule as kings of winter for 8,000 years. This is the magic that builds walls, that preserves, that whispers, winter is coming, as both warning and promise. The second is fire, transformative, consuming, prophetic, embodied in dragons and the Red Priest's visions. This is the force that destroys and recreates, that burns away the old to birth the new, that powers the obsidian candles and enables Targaryen dreams of the future. But the third force, often overlooked, is earth or life itself, the connecting, growing, communal magic of the old gods, the weirwoods, the greenseers, and the children of the forest. This is the magic that binds, that communicates across vast distances, that unites the living in defense against both ice's endless preservation and fire's endless transformation. The three-headed dragon isn't about three people riding three literal dragons. It represents the restoration of balance through the union of these forces. Jon Snow carries ice in his Stark blood and fire in his Targaryen heritage. Bran Stark, as the three-eyed raven, embodies the earth magic of the Greenseers. And Daenerys Targaryen, with her dragons and her immunity to fire, channels pure fire magic. These three heads must unite their respective powers to confront the coming darkness, a threat greater than the others, perhaps the same force that caused the Long Night, destroyed Valyria, and now works through agents like Euron Greyjoy to destabilize the world once more. Rhaegar misunderstood. It wasn't about having three children. It was about uniting three magical traditions that had been sundered long ago, perhaps since the doom of Valyria, or even since the Long Night. The dragon must have three heads, not because dragons need riders, but because the world needs balance to survive. Consider how this reframes the story's central conflicts. The struggle for the Iron Throne becomes almost irrelevant, a distraction from the true cosmic battle for balance. The characters we follow most closely, Jon, Daenerys, and Bran, are unconsciously drawn together, not by politics, but by primordial forces working through them. The Red Priests speak of the prince that was promised, but perhaps there is no single prince. Perhaps the promise is fulfilled only when ice, fire, and earth unite their powers against the encroaching void. This would explain why prophecies seem both clear and contradictory. They point not to a single savior, but to a cosmic alignment, a convergence of powers. This interpretation also explains why magic is returning to the world. As these three forces begin to awaken and seek each other, as dragons hatch, as the others stir, as the Weirwood network activates through Bran, the long-dormant energies flow more freely throughout the world. Glass candles burn, wargs emerge, forgotten spells regain their potency. The world itself is preparing for the final confrontation, the restoration of balance, or its ultimate dissolution. Theory 3. The Bleeding Star and Dawn. A non-Targaryen Azor Ahai, The prophecy of Azor Ahai's return has become inextricably linked with Targaryen blood through the interpretation of Red Priests like Melisandre and the obsession of princes like Rhaegar Targaryen. But what if this connection is fundamentally mistaken? What if the true meaning has been lost in translation across thousands of years and hundreds of languages? Consider the essential elements of the prophecy. The hero reborn amidst salt and smoke beneath a bleeding star, to wake dragons from stone and wield Lightbringer against the darkness. Most interpretations focus on the red comet seen across Westeros, and Essos as the bleeding star. But what if the reference is far more specific? Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dayne, is repeatedly described using imagery that evokes both stars and light. Unlike Valyrian steel blades, which are dark and smoky, Dawn is pale as milk glass, yet alive with light. It was forged from the heart of a fallen star, literally a meteorite that struck Westeros at the place where Starfall was later built. The Sword of the Morning who wields it must be a Dane worthy of the honor, chosen for both skill and character. This theory posits that Dawn itself is Lightbringer, the legendary sword of Azor Ahai, not a replica or successor, but the very same, weapon preserved through the ages. The bleeding star in the prophecy refers not to a comet, but to the sword itself, passed down through House Dayne, waiting for the right bearer in the coming dark. Who might this bearer be? Perhaps it's Edric Dayne, the young lord of Starfall, or an as-yet unrevealed character with Dayne blood. More intriguingly, some speculate that Jon Snow himself might have a connection to House Dayne through his wet nurse Wylla, who came from Starfall, or through some deeper relationship between the Danes and Targaryens or Starks. The most compelling aspect is how this reframes our understanding of the prophecy's fulfillment. It moves away from the idea that Azor Ahai must be of Targaryen descent, with their emphasis on fire magic and dragons, and instead points to the more mysterious House Dayne, a family whose origins predate the Andal invasion and who may have ties to the great Empire of the Dawn, an ancient civilization that existed before Valyria. There's another curious connection worth noting. Arthur Dayne, the last great Sword of the Morning, died at the Tower of Joy, protecting Rhaegar's son by Lyanna Stark. If Dawn is Lightbringer, was Arthur merely its temporary custodian, destined to bring it close to its true wielder? Was his presence at the Tower of Joy not just about fulfilling Rhaegar's commands, but about ensuring a prophesied convergence of sword and heir? The purple eyes common in House Dayne, despite their First Men heritage, hint at ancient connections. Do the same bloodlines that eventually flowered in Valyria. Perhaps the Danes are the original Dragon Lords, their power expressed not through taming dragons, but through their unique star-forged blade. If Dawn is Lightbringer, then the true weapon against the others has been hiding in plain sight all along, misinterpreted by those seeking flaming swords rather than one alive with light. In the coming darkness, when Valyrian steel proves insufficient, this pale blade might be the decisive factor, not because it burns with fire, but because it shines with the light of the stars themselves. Theory 4. The Secret of the Winterfell. Crypts, wards against the Stark's own power. Deep beneath Winterfell lie the crypts, not merely a burial place, but a magical prison of immense significance. The iron swords are not ceremonial but functional, performing an ancient binding ritual renewed with each Stark burial. The Starks are not simply an old noble house. They are descendants of Brandon the Builder, who raised both Winterfell and the Wall using magic now forgotten. Old Nan's tales speak of the Night's King, a Stark who fell to darkness and sacrificed to the others. The recurring phrase, "There must always be a Stark in Winterfell," is no mere tradition, but a magical necessity. The kings of winter are buried with iron swords across their laps. Iron is specifically mentioned throughout folklore as anathema to magical creatures. The others, the children of the forest, even skin changers lose their powers when bound in iron. The oldest tombs, deepest in the crypts, are those whose swords have rusted away entirely, leaving nothing to bind whatever lies within. Jon Snow's persistent nightmares of the crypts feature voices calling to him from the darkness, stones grinding open, and a compulsion drawing him deeper into the lower levels. These are not simple anxiety dreams, but his latent Stark magic responding to the greater power below. The Stark bloodline carries a dormant form of ice magic, similar to but distinct from the power of the others. It's a power that allowed them to survive the harsh northern winters for thousands of years, to build the wall and to rule as kings of winter. But it's also a power that, if fully awakened, might transform a Stark into something akin to the Night's King of legend. The Iron Sword served to bind this power, preventing it from awakening even after death. The deeper, older tombs with rusted swords may explain the crypt's reputation for restlessness. The ancient kings of winter, their binding iron long since decayed, stir in their sleep as the others rise again beyond the wall, calling to their distant kin. Consider the implications. The statues in the crypts with their stone direwolves at their feet echo the living Stark children and their companions. But what if these aren't just commemorative sculptures, but vessels ready to house the awakened power of the dead kings? What if the stone direwolves could become ice direwolves, just as the others raise the dead into wights? The most bone-chilling possibility is that the Starks have been unconsciously preparing for this moment across generations. Winter is coming is not just a warning, but a prophecy, and perhaps even a promise. The crypts might contain not just the remains of Stark lords, but the carefully preserved arsenal of the kings of winter, waiting for the moment when the others breach the wall, and the ancient pact must be fulfilled one way or another. When Branny Stark dreams of the three-eyed crow leading him deeper into the crypts, he's not just confronting his family's history, but his family's power. The crow, later revealed as the three-eyed raven, is guiding him toward understanding this inheritance, preparing him to wield or contain it when the iron bonds finally fail. What happens when the swords in the darkness fail? What awakens when there is no Stark in Winterfell? The direwolves' return south of the wall coincided with the others' rising. Perhaps these events also coincide with the awakening of ancient Stark magic that has slumbered for generations. In the final battle, when the dead march on Winterfell, the crypts might become not a refuge, but the epicenter of power as the ancient kings of winter rise. Not as mindless wights serving the others, but as independent forces following their own ancient purpose. Whether they stand with the living or pursue some older, darker agenda known only to those who remember the first long night will depend on whether there is, indeed, a Stark in Winterfell who can control what awakens below. Theory 5. The Tragedy of Summerhall. Aegon V's misguided prophetic sacrifice. Few events in recent Westerosi history remain as shrouded in mystery as the tragedy at Summerhall, the calamitous fire that claimed the lives of King Aegon V Targaryen, his son Duncan the Small, and the legendary knight Sir Duncan the Tall. On the surface, it appears to be a cautionary tale about Targaryen obsession with hatching dragons. But beneath that simple narrative lies a far more complex and haunting truth. King Aegon V, known as Aegon the Unlikely for his improbable path to the throne, was unlike many of his predecessors. Having spent years traveling the realm, disguised as a squire to Sir Duncan, he had seen firsthand the suffering of the small folk. Upon claiming the crown, he instituted reforms aimed at improving their condition, often at the expense of noble privileges. Predictably, the lords of Westeros resisted. As years passed and resistance to his reforms mounted, Aegon grew increasingly frustrated with the limitations of his power. Without dragons, the great equalizers that had allowed his ancestors to rule absolutely, he could not force the noble houses to comply with his vision for a more just realm. This pragmatic concern merged dangerously with the mystical currents flowing through House Targaryen. Aegon's brother, Aemon Targaryen, had encountered prophecies about the prince that was promised during his studies as a Maester. These prophecies spoke of a savior born amid salt and smoke, destined to fight back the darkness with Lightbringer. The brothers corresponded secretly, and Aegon became convinced that this prince would emerge from his own bloodline. But how could a savior battle darkness without dragons? How could his descendant fulfill the prophecy without the traditional Targaryen weapon? Aegon's focus shifted from political reform to prophetic preparation. He gathered ancient Targaryen texts, consulted with mystics from Asshai, and became fascinated with the possibility of hatching dragon eggs through ritual magic. The culmination came at Summerhall, the Summer Palace. On the same night that his great-grandson Rhaegar was to be born, Aegon gathered family members, trusted advisors, pyromancers, and 7 dragon eggs. The ritual would involve wildfire, blood sacrifice, and ancient Valyrian incantations. Some whisper that it also involved a form of human sacrifice, perhaps unwitting, perhaps voluntary, perhaps both. What exactly occurred remains unclear, but we know the outcome, a conflagration that consumed the palace, the king, and many others. Yet from this tragedy, Rhaegar Targaryen was born amid salt and smoke. Salt from his mother's tears, smoke from the burning palace. The very disaster that killed his great-grandfather became the circumstances that, in Rhaegar's mind, marked him as the prophesied prince. This tragedy represents a horrible irony. Aegon Fief, who had spent his early life championing the common people, ultimately sacrificed himself and others in a mystical gambit, driven by the very kind of Targaryen exceptionalism he had once rejected. His genuine desire to help the realm became twisted by prophecy and tradition into a catastrophic attempt to restore dragons to Westeros. Even more tragically, the magical working might have partially succeeded. Although no dragons emerged from the flames of Summerhall, the ritual may have awakened something in the Targaryen bloodline or in the world's dormant magic. Rhaegar's obsession with prophecy, the return of the Red Comet, the eventual hatching of Daenerys' dragons, all might trace their origins to that terrible night when a good king made a fatal mistake, using fire and blood to chase a prophecy he never fully understood. The whispered truth is that Aegon Fief didn't die because of simple mishandling of wildfire. He died performing a ritual sacrifice, believing his death would serve a greater purpose: the rebirth of dragons and the eventual salvation of the realm. From a darkness he foresaw but couldn't prevent by ordinary means. His last words, recorded fragmentarily in a burned page of Archmaester Gyldain's history, are said to have been, "The prince that was promised." Theory 6. The Doom of Valyria, an inside job by the first Faceless Men. The cataclysm that destroyed Valyria, the Doom, has long been attributed to natural forces. The simultaneous eruption of the 14 flames, the chain of volcanoes that powered the Freehold's sorcery. But what if nature alone wasn't responsible? What if the greatest catastrophe in recorded history was actually the culmination of the most ambitious assassination plot ever conceived? Beneath the glittering spires of Valyria, in mines that burned with the heat of the 14 flames, countless slaves toiled in conditions so horrific that death was their only mercy. It was here, amidst suffering beyond imagining, that the first Faceless Men emerged. Not as an organized cult, but as a response to unendurable pain. These early death bringers offered the gift of release to their fellow slaves. A whispered prayer, a gentle touch, and suffering would end. From these humble beginnings, something more profound evolved. The slaves prayed to many gods, but all were asking for the same gift. Thus was born the concept of the many-faced god, Death, wearing different masks, but always offering the same release. As their understanding deepened, so did their ambition. Why offer the gift only to individual sufferers when the true source of pain, Valyria itself, could be given the gift? The Faceless Men began to infiltrate every level of Valyrian society. They walked among the Dragon Lords, wearing stolen faces. They learned the secrets of the 14 Flames and the spells that kept them in check. For decades, perhaps centuries, they prepared. They studied the fire mages who controlled the volcanoes. They learned which spells prevented eruptions and which critical points, if disrupted, would cause catastrophic failure. They identified the key mages whose deaths would ensure maximum destruction. And then, on a day like any other, they struck. In perfect synchronization, the Faceless Men assassinated dozens of crucial fire mages throughout Valyria, with no one to maintain the spells that controlled the 14 Flames. The volcanoes erupted simultaneously. Fire rained from the sky. The land broke apart. The sea rushed in. And in a single day, the greatest civilization the world had ever known was wiped from existence. This wasn't merely revenge, it was justice on a cosmic scale. The slaves of Valyria, who had suffered and died by the millions to build its splendor, achieved through death what they never could in life: freedom from their masters and the end of the system that had consumed them. The Faceless Men who survived established themselves in Braavos, the secret city founded by escaped slaves. There, they refined their arts and built the House of Black and White, but they never forgot their original purpose: to give the gift of death to those who suffer and to balance the scales of cosmic justice, no matter how long it might take. This explains the Faceless Men's continued interest in dragons. They aren't merely assassins for hire. They are the inheritors of a mission that began in the mines of Valyria. The dragons, the source of the Dragon Lord's power and the instruments of their oppression, all died out after the Doom. Now that dragons have returned to the world through Daenerys Targaryen, the Faceless Men may see a need to finish what they started centuries ago. Their interest in Arya Stark makes sense in this context. A girl with the ability to wear faces naturally, with access to a Valyrian steel dagger and with connections to potential dragon riders, could be invaluable in their ancient mission. The question remains: will Arya become their instrument against the dragons, or will her own sense of justice lead her to reject their ancient vendetta? The doom of Valyria wasn't just a natural disaster, it was the most perfect assassination in history, one so complete that even the memory of Valyria has faded into legend, while the organization responsible continues to thrive in the shadows, impatiently watching for any sign that the wheel of fire and blood might turn again. Theory 7. The Night's King's Pact, a stark bargain for winter's respite. In the darkness of the long night, when the others swept down from the lands of always winter, humanity faced extinction. The battle for the dawn ended this existential threat, or so the stories tell us. But what if the long night didn't truly end with a decisive victory? What if it ended with a pact, a terrible bargain struck by a stark ancestor that still binds the North today? The legend of the Night's King tells of the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. He brought her back to the Night Fort and proclaimed himself king and her his queen. For 13 years they ruled, making sacrifices to the others, until Brandon the Breaker, the King of Winter, and Joramun, the King beyond the Wall, joined forces to defeat him. After his fall, it was discovered he was a Stark, a brother to the King of Winter. This narrative, passed down as a cautionary tale, conceals a more profound and disturbing truth. The Night's King wasn't seduced by another. He made a calculated bargain with them. The long night had devastated the realm, and conventional warfare was failing to push back the tide of the dead. The Night's King, this forgotten Stark, recognized that humanity couldn't win through strength of arms alone. So he offered the others a pact, regular sacrifices in exchange for withdrawing beyond the lands of always winter. The wall would mark the boundary of their respective domains. The others would retreat, winter would recede, and humanity would survive at a price. The Night's King didn't make this pact out of lust or madness, but out of desperate pragmatism. He sacrificed his honor, his name, and ultimately his place in history to save what remained of humanity. Brandon the Breaker, his brother, couldn't accept the terms of this pact. He overthrew the Night's King, but couldn't undo the bargain that had been struck. Instead, he took the burden upon House Stark. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell isn't simply tradition, it's an obligation. The Starks became the wardens of the pact, ensuring the terms were met while publicly denying its existence. The words of House Stark, "Winter is coming," serve as both a warning and a reminder of their duty. They speak not just of seasonal change, but of the consequences should the pact be broken. For thousands of years, the Starks maintained this dark equilibrium. They sent criminals to the wall, knowing some would be taken as sacrifices beyond it. They maintained the lie that the others were defeated or never existed. Craster, with his offerings of sons to the gods, is merely the most recent and visible keeper of this ancient tradition. His direct sacrifices are crude but effective, maintaining the pact in its most basic form. The Night's Watch, without fully understanding why, has continued to turn a blind eye to his activities, guided by some instinctive recognition of their necessity. But the pact is failing. With the Starks scattered, with no Stark in Winterfell, the ancient agreement has been breached. The others stir again, moving south not as invaders, but as creditors coming to collect an overdue debt. They don't seek to destroy humanity out of malice. They come because the terms of the Night's King's bargain have been broken. Jon Snow's recurring dream of standing alone on the wall with a burning sword, facing the darkness, takes on new significance. As a man with Stark blood serving in the Night's Watch, he stands at the intersection of the two lineages responsible for the pact. His destiny may be not to defeat the others through battle, but to renew or transform the ancient agreement, to find a way to coexist with the eternal winter that doesn't require endless sacrifice. The bittersweet ending that George R.R. Martin has promised may involve the recognition and renegotiation of this pact, acknowledging that the long night never truly ended, but was only held at bay through a bargain written in blood and maintained through thousands of years of necessary deception. Theory 8. The Curse of Harrenhal. Weirwood desecration and old gods' wrath. Harrenhal, the largest castle ever built, in Westeros, a monument to hubris and by all accounts cursed. Every house that has held it has come to ruin. But why? Is it simply that the castle is too large to maintain, too costly to garrison? Or does something more sinister linger in its blackened towers? The conventional explanation for Harrenhal's ill fortune begins with Aegon the Conqueror's dragonfire, which transformed Harren the Black and his sons into charred corpses inside their newly completed fortress. But the castle's dark reputation precedes even this event. Workers died under mysterious circumstances during its construction. Strange sounds echoed through half-built halls. The small folk whispered that the castle was cursed before a single Targaryen set foot in Westeros. The true origin of the curse lies in what Harren destroyed to build his monument. For 5 generations, the Horrors demanded tribute from the Riverlands to construct their seat. Thousands of trees were felled, including weirwoods that had stood since before the first men came to Westeros. Ancient groves sacred to the old gods were clear-cut. Their blood-red leaves and bone-white trunks were fed to the fires that baked the mortar for Harran's towers. These weren't ordinary weirwoods. They stood on the shores of the God's Eye, near the Isle of Faces, the most sacred site of the old gods in Westeros, where the pact between the first men and the children of the forest was signed. Each weirwood Harran destroyed was a living connection to that ancient power, a consciousness tied to the Green Seers and the children, and each destruction was an act of profound sacrilege. The old gods are patient, but not forgiving. Through the Weirwood network, they witnessed their brothers and sisters being cut down, burned, and built into the very stones of Harrenhal. They responded not with immediate vengeance, but with a persistent, corrupting influence that would ensure Harran never enjoyed his conquest, and that no one after him would hold his castle without paying a terrible price. Look at the evidence. The heart tree in Harrenhal's Godswood is described as having a terrible face, its mouth twisted in rage, its eyes alive with hate. Unlike the solemn expressions of most heart trees, this one actively expresses malevolence. The Godswood itself is overgrown and neglected, not because the current occupants don't care for it, but because none can bear to remain there long. The old gods speak through this tree, and what they say is not forgiveness, but condemnation. Every family that has held Harrenhal has suffered loss, madness, infertility, accident, or betrayal. The curse doesn't simply bring bad fortune, it specifically targets bloodlines, ensuring that no house can establish a dynasty there. This is the vengeance of the old gods, who saw their ancient children destroyed and incorporated into this monument to human pride. The curse manifests in subtle ways. Those who sleep within Harrenhal's walls report nightmares of roots growing through their bodies, of faces in the stone watching them, of whispers in an ancient tongue. The massive castle seems to resist human occupation. Its kitchens burn food, its wells turn brackish, its chambers remain cold despite roaring fires. Beric Dondarrion's Brotherhood, without banners, refused to use Harrenhal as a base despite its strategic value. Thoros of Myr, gazing into his flames there, saw only death. Even the pragmatic Tywin Lannister stayed no longer than necessary. The brave companions descended into exceptional cruelty and madness within its walls. Perhaps most telling is the Godswood Pool at the heart of Harrenhal. Unlike the hot springs of Winterfell, which bring life and warmth, this black pool steams with an unnatural heat, as if the molten core of the earth still rages at the defilement committed there. The curse will never be lifted until the debt is repaid, until the castle built through sacrilege is torn down and the sacred grove replanted. Only then might the terrible face of the heart tree soften and the old gods consider their vengeance complete. Until that day, Harrenhal will continue to devour every family that claims it, feeding an ancient and patient hunger that has waited centuries for justice. Theory 9. The Isle of Faces, a reservoir of ancient magic for the next long night. At the center of the God's Eye, the largest lake in Westeros, lies an island shrouded in mystery, the Isle of Faces. Here, thousands of weirwoods grow, each carved with a face to witness the pact between the first men and the children of the forest. For millennia, the island has been guarded by the enigmatic Green Men, who allow few visitors to set foot on its sacred shores. But what if the Isle isn't merely a historical monument or a religious site? What if it serves a far more crucial purpose, as a magical reservoir carefully maintained for thousands of years in preparation for the next long night? Consider what we know. The children of the forest possessed powerful nature magic. They could call down lightning, move earth, and communicate across vast distances through the Weirwood network. The breaking of the Arm of Dawn and the flooding of the Neck are attributed to their desperate attempts to hold back human invaders. These feats required immense magical power power that seems largely absent from the modern world. After the pact, most children gradually disappeared from Westeros. The few who remained retreated north of the Wall or to remote hidden places, but the Isle of Faces has been continuously occupied and carefully tended for thousands of years. Why maintain such a significant presence at this specific location? If it were merely commemorative, the answer lies in the unique properties of the Isle. It sits at the center of a massive lake, surrounded by water, traditionally a boundary that magical forces cannot easily cross. Water preserves and protects. The Isle's isolation has kept it safe from the wars, religious changes, and technological advances that swept across Westeros, allowing the old magics to be preserved undiluted. The concentration of weirwoods is key. Each weirwood is a conduit for magic, a living connection to the collective consciousness that the children tap into. A single weirwood provides power. Thousands of them, growing together for millennia, create a nexus of magical energy unparalleled anywhere in the known world. The Green Men aren't simply caretakers. They're guardians of this power, ensuring it remains untapped until needed. They maintain ancient rites and knowledge passed down since the Age of Heroes. They may include not only humans, but surviving children of the forest, preserving their bloodline and magic away from the eyes of those who would destroy them. Howland Reed's visit to the Isle is significant. As one of the few outsiders permitted to stay there, he gained knowledge that changed him fundamentally. He returned with abilities and insight that made him crucial to events like the Tower of Joy. His connection to the Isle may explain why his seat, Greywater Watch, moves and cannot be found by ravens. It employs the same protective magic that shields the Isle from unwanted attention. The true purpose of this magical reservoir is preparation for the coming darkness. The children foresaw the return of the Long Night and the others. They knew humanity would need the old magics to survive, but they also knew these powers couldn't be entrusted to humans who might misuse them for conquest or petty advantage. So they created a sanctuary, a place where magic could grow and strengthen, protected from corruption, ready to be unleashed when the true threat emerged. The Isle of Faces isn't a relic of the past. It's a weapon meant for the future. As winter descends on Westeros and the others march south, the Isle may finally reveal its purpose. The Green Men might emerge from seclusion, bringing with them magical knowledge that could turn the tide. The thousands of weirwood trees, each a conscious participant in the coming battle, might awaken to defend the realms of men in ways we can scarcely imagine. This would explain why the three-eyed raven guided Bran Stark to become his successor. As the Greenseer's consciousness merges with Bran's, he gains access to not only the memory of the world, but potentially to the untapped power of the Isle of Faces. Through the Weirwood network, Bran might be able to channel this ancient reservoir of magic to where it's most needed in the final battle. The Isle of Faces isn't just a sacred site. It's the magical heart of Westeros, pulsing with power gathered across millennia, waiting for the moment when darkness falls and the trees remember their purpose. Theory 10, the Great Empire of the Dawn, progenitors of Valyrian blood and magic. Before the rise of Valyria, before the Long Night, an advanced civilization flourished in the far east of Essos, the Great Empire of the Dawn. Most dismiss it as legend, tales of god-emperors who reigned for centuries, of cities built from opalescent stone, of a time when the sun never set. But what if these weren't merely stories? What if this forgotten empire was the true source of what we now call the blood of the dragon? The clues lie scattered throughout the world, hiding in plain sight. The 5 forts along the eastern edge of Yi Tai, massive structures of fused black stone that resemble the Valyrian architecture of Dragonstone, yet predate Valyria by thousands of years. The oily black stone of the Seastone Chair, the base of the High Tower, and the buildings of Asshai, all constructed using techniques lost to modern civilization. The legends of Azor Ahai and the Gemstone Emperors, echoing across cultures separated by vast distances. According to ancient texts, the rulers of the Great Empire had otherworldly features, silver gold hair and purple eyes, precisely the traits associated with Valyrian dragon lords millennia later. But the Great Empire didn't just happen to share these characteristics, they were the source. The Valyrians weren't unique. They were inheritors of an older legacy, perhaps even refugees or colonists from the fallen empire. The Bloodstone Emperor, last ruler of the Great Empire, is said to have practiced dark arts, enslaved his people, and worshipped a black stone that fell from the sky, possibly a meteorite similar to the one that formed Dawn. The Sword of House Dane. His reign of terror ended with a catastrophe known as the Long Night, when the sun hid its face for a generation. This cataclysm shattered the Great Empire, sending its survivors fleeing across Essos. Some found refuge in remote valleys, where they would eventually tame dragons and found Valyria. Others sailed across the Sunset Sea to Westeros, becoming houses like Dane and Hightower, whose unusual features and ancient knowledge hint at their extraordinary origins. The Valyrians didn't discover dragons and develop magical abilities through random chance. They reclaimed fragments of knowledge and power from their ancestral civilization. Their blood magic, their ability to bind dragons, even the fused stone architecture they're famous for. All these were pale imitations of arts perfected in the Great Empire of the Dawn. House Targaryen's obsession with prophecy takes on new significance in this light. Their dragon dreams aren't simply magical abilities. They're genetic memories of the catastrophe that destroyed their ancestral homeland. When Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the doom of Valyria, she was experiencing an echo of an older apocalypse. One that her bloodline had survived before and would survive again. The mysterious city of Asshai, with its buildings of oily black stone where no children are born and food must be imported, may be one of the last intact remnants of the Great Empire. Its sorcerers preserve fragments of knowledge from before the Long Night, explaining why Melisandre and other Red Priests journey there to complete their training. The Shadowlands beyond Asshai could be the location of the Empire's capital, rendered uninhabitable by whatever magical catastrophe ended its reign. This theory transforms our understanding of the current struggles in Westeros. The conflict between ice and fire isn't simply about White Walkers and dragons. It's the latest battle in an ancient war that began with the fall of the Great Empire. The others may be responding to the re-emergence of dragon magic in the world. Magic derived from their ancient enemies. Daenerys Targaryen, with her silver gold hair and purple eyes, her affinity for dragons, and her dreams of a better world, isn't just the last Targaryen. She's an unwitting avatar of the Great Empire's legacy. Her instinctive understanding of dragon binding and her remarkable immunity to fire stem not from Valyrian blood alone, but from this deeper, older bloodline. The wheel she seeks to break has been turning for far longer than she knows, since the dawn of civilization itself. And the Song of Ice and Fire that plays out across Westeros is merely the latest verse in an ancient melody that began in the Great Empire of the Dawn, where god emperors with gemstone eyes ruled beneath an eternal sun. Theory 11. The Citadel's true agenda: monopolizing magic, not eradicating it. The Maesters of the Citadel present themselves as champions of reason in a world plagued by superstition. Their rejection of magic seems principled, the rational stance of scholars dedicated to knowledge over mysticism. But what if this public position masks a far more complex and calculating agenda? What if the Citadel doesn't seek to eliminate magic from the world, but to control it exclusively? Consider the contradictions. Maesters formally denounce magic while maintaining a Valyrian steel link in their chain for those who study the higher mysteries. They claim dragons are gone forever, while possessing the world's largest repository of dragon lore. They dismiss green seers and skin changers as northern folklore, while keeping ancient texts about warging under lock and key. Most tellingly, the Citadel possesses glass candles, obsidian artifacts from Valyria that allow users to see across vast distances, communicate telepathically, and potentially enter dreams. These candles couldn't light for centuries, but as magic returns to the world, they burn again. If the Maesters truly wish to eradicate magic, why preserve these powerful tools? The answer lies in the Citadel's origins and true purpose. Founded during the Age of Heroes, the Citadel emerged in Old Town, a city already ancient when the Andals arrived, built around the enigmatic Hightower with its black stone base of uncertain origin. The Maesters didn't create their order in opposition to magic, but in response to its misuse. Early Maesters witnessed firsthand the devastation caused by unchecked magical forces, the wars between the First Men and the Children of the Forest, the terrible winter of the Long Night, the rise and fall of magical dynasties. They recognized magic as a sword without a hilt, dangerous to wield, impossible to control fully, yet too powerful to discard entirely. Their solution wasn't eradication, but monopolization. By gathering magical knowledge while publicly denouncing it, the Citadel could remove these dangerous tools from untrained hands while preserving them for what they deemed proper use. Over centuries, this pragmatic approach evolved into institutional policy. The Maesters systematically collected magical artifacts and texts, removed them from circulation, and stored them in their vaults. They embedded themselves in noble houses across Westeros, positioning themselves to identify and recruit children showing magical aptitude, particularly those with green sight, prophetic dreams, or other talents. These children would be encouraged to join the Citadel, where their abilities could be studied, controlled, and potentially harnessed. Their campaign against dragons wasn't motivated by a hatred of magic, but by the threat dragons posed to their monopoly. Dragons represented a form of magic they couldn't control, one tied specifically to Targaryen blood. As long as dragons flew, the Targaryens possessed power independent of Maester influence. Archmaester Marwyn's claim that the Citadel orchestrated the dragon's extinction wasn't the rambling of a maverick, but a rare moment of institutional honesty. This explains the Citadel's intense interest in Daenerys Targaryen. Her hatching of 3 dragons represents not just the return of a supposedly extinct species, but a direct challenge to the Maester's carefully constructed magical monopoly. Similarly, Bran Stark's emergence as a powerful green seer threatens their control over prophetic and far-seeing magics. The anti-magic stance serves as perfect cover. By positioning themselves as rationalists opposed to superstition, the Maesters can dismiss any accusations of magical practice as absurd on their face. Who would believe that the very organization denouncing sorcery practices it in secret? Yet hints of their true nature appear throughout their institutions: the obsidian candle burning in Marwyn's chambers, the restricted vaults beneath the Citadel where forbidden texts are kept, the fact that Maesters alone know how to create Valyrian steel links, despite the supposed loss of that knowledge elsewhere in the world. Most revealing is their response to the return of magic. Rather than celebrating the confirmation of forces they supposedly dismissed as mythology, the Archmaesters react with alarm. They discourage Samwell Tarly from discussing White Walkers. They refuse to spread warnings about the coming winter. They reject reports of dragons despite multiple confirmations. This isn't the reaction of scientists faced with new evidence. It's the panic of gatekeepers witnessing the collapse of their monopoly. As magic returns to the world, as dragons fly, as wargs emerge in the north, as prophetic dreams become more common, the Citadel faces a crisis. Their carefully controlled magical knowledge, hoarded for centuries, risks becoming commonplace. Their unique position as the secret wielders of forbidden arts is threatened. In the wars to come, the Citadel won't stand with humanity against the darkness out of altruism. They'll act to preserve their monopoly, potentially working against those who wield magic outside their control, even if those independent practitioners represent the realm's best hope for survival. The Maesters don't hate magic, they hate competition. Theory 12. Surviving reigns, a secret lineage in the Golden Company. And who are you, the proud lord said, that I must bow so low? The haunting lyrics of the Reigns of Castamere tell a seemingly definitive tale. House Rayne challenged the Lannisters and was utterly destroyed for their presumption. Tywin Lannister damned the Red Lion's entire bloodline, diverting rivers to drown every last Rayne in their underground halls. Not a single survivor remained to tell the tale, or so the song would have us believe. But what if the extinction of House Rayne wasn't as complete as Tywin imagined? What if, even as water filled the mines of Castamere, some descendants of the Red Lion had already escaped beyond Tywin's reach? The key lies in the Blackfyre rebellions, those persistent challenges to Targaryen rule that repeatedly divided the realm. Historical records mention a Sir Robb Rayne, who fought for Daemon Blackfyre in the First Blackfyre Rebellion. This places a Rayne Knight firmly in the rebel camp decades before Tywin's purge. When Daemon Blackfyre and his sons fell at the Battle of Redgrass Field, many of their supporters fled across the narrow sea to Essos. Some eventually formed the Golden Company, an elite mercenary force composed of exiles and their descendants. All dream of returning to reclaim lost lands and titles in Westeros. It's entirely plausible that Sir Robb Rayne was among those exiles. He may have fathered children in Essos, who grew up as members of the Golden Company, proudly maintaining their Rayne identity while beyond the Lannisters' reach. These children would have been the cousins or distant relations of the main Rayne, line that Tywin later extinguished. Over generations, these Essosi Raynes would have preserved their heritage while serving in the company's ranks. They might have intermarried with other exiled Westerosi houses, strengthening their connections to the continent they still considered home. All the while, they waited for an opportunity to return and seek vengeance against the Lions of Castamere. Consider the Golden Company's composition. Men with lost causes, carrying ancestral weapons and signet rings of houses believed extinct. They maintain detailed records of their members' lineages, a practice unusual for mercenaries, but essential for exiles determined to remember who they are. Among these carefully documented bloodlines, the Rayne descendants could have preserved their identity while hiding from Lannister attention. The timing is particularly suggestive. When Tywin moved against Castamere, he was a young man making his reputation. The Rayne Tarbeck Rebellion was his opportunity to demonstrate his ruthlessness. But by then, the Golden Company had existed for decades, potentially harboring distant members of House Rayne who had joined following the Blackfyre defeat. These surviving Raynes would have watched from across the narrow sea as Tywin destroyed their ancestral home and their main family line. Unable to intervene, they would have added this grievance to their already substantial reasons for hating the Lannisters, who had fought against their Blackfyre allies. This theory gains further credence when we consider the Golden Company's recent actions. After decades of refusing contracts in Westeros, they suddenly break tradition and accept Cersei Lannister's gold. On the surface, this appears to be simple mercenary pragmatism. They need a new patron after losses in Essos. But what if some officers within the company have ulterior motives? Infiltrating Westeros under Lannister employment would give any surviving Raynes the perfect opportunity for long-awaited revenge. They would gain access to Casterly Rock itself, to the Lannister inner circle, and to the secrets and weaknesses of their ancient enemies. From such a position, patient vengeance could be executed when least expected. The most tantalizing possibility involves the Golden Company's commander, the enigmatic Harry Strickland. Described as cautious and unimpressive compared to his predecessors, Strickland might be hiding more than meets the eye. Could his seeming reluctance to engage in battle mask a more complex strategy? Might his decision to take the Lannister contract stem not from greed, but from a generations-old vendetta? If even a single drop of Rain blood flows in the Golden Company's ranks, the famous line, "Not a soul survived," becomes the greatest miscalculation in Tywin Lannister's otherwise flawless execution of power. And in the Game of Thrones, where presumed dead houses like the Targaryens and Blackfyres continually threaten to return, the sudden reappearance of a Rain heir would represent poetic justice of the highest order, the consequences of Tywin's brutality returning to haunt his children long after his death. The Lions of Casterly Rock may think they've heard the last of the Rains, but if this theory holds true, the Red Lions still roam in exile, awaiting the perfect moment to prove that their claws are just as sharp. Theory 13. The Faceless Men and the Iron Bank. A symbiotic war against slavery and dragons. In Braavos, two organizations stand as pillars of the city's power and influence. The Iron Bank, whose vaults contain enough gold to make or break kingdoms, and the Faceless Men, whose assassins can end any life for the right price. On the surface, they seem distinct entities with different purposes, one financial, one lethal. But what if they're actually two branches of the same ancient mission, working in concert toward shared goals established centuries ago? Braavos itself was founded by escaped slaves who fled Valyrian bondage and established a hidden city in the lagoon. The Faceless Men originated in the mines of Valyria, offering death as mercy to suffering slaves before expanding their gift to include the Dragon Lords, who inflicted that suffering. The Iron Bank's origins are less clear in the histories, but its establishment coincides with Braavos revealing itself to the world after the doom of Valyria. This shared heritage creates the foundation for a deeper connection. Both institutions were born from the Valyrian slave system, the Faceless Men as a direct response to its cruelty, the Iron Bank as a means for former slaves to secure and expand their hard-won freedom through financial power. The evidence for their collaboration appears in subtle patterns. The Iron Bank is famously ruthless in collecting debts, yet no one seems to know exactly how they enforce repayment from recalcitrant rulers. Meanwhile, the Faceless Men require enormous sums for their services, yet the House of Black and White shows no signs of ostentatious wealth. Where does their money go? Where does the Iron Bank's enforcement come from? The answer is elegantly simple. They serve each other. When the Iron Bank cannot collect a debt through conventional means, they don't directly hire the Faceless Men. They simply mark the debt as a worthy sacrifice to the many-faced god. The Faceless Men, recognizing this signal, eliminate the debtor, causing political chaos that invariably leads to the rise of a new ruler who promptly repays the bank to establish legitimacy. In return, the exorbitant fees paid to the Faceless Men for their other contracts flow back to the Iron Bank, providing additional capital for their financial operations. This circular flow of money and death creates a self-sustaining system that benefits both organizations while maintaining plausible deniability. But this alliance goes beyond mere business convenience. Both organizations share a deeper ideological purpose, the systematic dismantling of slavery and the prevention of another Valyrian-style empire from rising in the world. The Iron Bank readily funds enemies of slave powers like Yunkai and Meereen. They backed the Night's Watch, which stands against the enslavement of the dead by the others. They've historically supported forces opposing Targaryen excesses, particularly when dragons were involved. Similarly, the Faceless Men show particular interest in those connected to dragons or slavery. Their presence in Oldtown, where Sam Tarly researches dragon lore, suggests concern about the return of dragons to the world. Their recruitment of Arya Stark, who has connections to both Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow, potential dragon riders, may be strategic rather than coincidental. This shared anti-slavery, anti-dragon agenda explains why Braavos has maintained its independence and influence for centuries, despite lacking the military might of other free cities. Through financial manipulation and targeted assassination, the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men have systematically undermined slave powers, while preventing any dragon-wielding faction from growing too strong. Their current challenge is Daenerys Targaryen, who embodies both their greatest fear, the return of dragons, and their central mission, the abolition of slavery. This contradiction may explain the apparent inconsistency in Braavosi policy toward her. The Iron Bank hasn't overtly supported her anti-slavery campaign, while the Faceless Men haven't directly targeted her despite her dragons. They're watching, waiting to see which aspect of her nature prevails. Will she become a liberator who happens to have dragons, or will the dragons transform her into a conqueror who happens to oppose slavery? Their eventual response, financial backing or a faceless assassin, will depend on this assessment. This theory transforms our understanding of events throughout Westeros and Dissos, the fall of kings, the rise of new dynasties, the flow of gold to certain causes. All might be part of an ancient, patient campaign orchestrated by former slaves determined to ensure that neither dragons nor chains ever threaten the world again. As winter falls and dragons soar, the ultimate question becomes, in the symbiotic war between the Iron Bank and the Faceless Men against the legacy of Valyria, which side will prevail? And at what cost to the rest of the world caught in their shadow game? Theory 14. Dragonstone's deeper purpose, a Valyrian magical amplifier. Dragonstone stands as a brooding sentinel at the entrance to Blackwater Bay, a fortress of black stone shaped into fantastic forms, dragons frozen in mid-flight, gargoyles perched on every corner. Its strategic location, controlling the approaches to King's Landing, is obvious. But what if its military value was secondary to its true purpose? What if the Valyrians built Dragonstone not primarily as an outpost, but as a magical machine, a device for amplifying, focusing, and projecting draconic power across vast distances? The evidence begins with the fortress itself. Unlike other castles in Westeros, Dragonstone wasn't built stone by stone. It was shaped as a single piece using Valyrian sorcery, the same techniques that created the fused stone roads of the Valyrian Freehold. The Dragon Lord Aenar Targaryen, who established the outpost a century before the Doom, brought with him not just his family and wealth, but 400 years of Targaryen sorcery and tradition. The timing is significant. Aenar relocated based on the prophetic dreams of his daughter Daenerys, who foresaw the doom of Valyria. But why choose this specific island? The rocky volcanic Dragonmont offered no particular agricultural or commercial advantages. What it did provide was a direct geological link to the 14 Flames, the chain of volcanoes that powered Valyrian magic. Dragonmont and the 14 Flames share the same deep fault line that runs beneath the narrow sea. The word dragon itself derives from ancient Valyrian words meaning fire and power. Dragonmont, literally Dragon Mountain, wasn't named merely for the creatures that roosted there, but for the telluric firepower flowing beneath it, connected to the same source that empowered Valyrian sorcery. The architecture of Dragonstone isn't merely decorative. The dragon motifs, the towers shaped like dragons, the obsidian formations, these are all components of an enormous magical apparatus. The dragons aren't statues but conductors, channeling and amplifying magical energies. The obsidian, frozen fire, serves as both insulator and resonator for these energies. This explains several anomalies about Dragonstone. Why the Targaryen's dragons thrived there, growing larger and healthier than might be expected on such a small island. Why Stannis Baratheon's men reported strange dreams and visions while stationed there. Why Melisandre specifically chose Dragonstone as her base, recognizing instinctively that her fire magic would be stronger within its walls. Most tellingly, it explains why Aegon the Conqueror used Dragonstone as his launching point for the conquest of Westeros. Rather than striking directly from Essos, he needed the magical amplification the fortress provided to extend his control over his dragons across the vast distances of his campaign. The original purpose of this magical machine would have been to maintain Valyrian control over dragons across their far-flung empire. The Dragon Lords needed a way to project their power beyond the immediate vicinity of the 14 Flames. Dragonstone, strategically positioned at the western edge of their influence, would have served as a relay station, extending the range of dragon-binding spells. After the Doom destroyed Valyria, Dragonstone became even more crucial. Without the central source of magical power in the 14 Flames, the surviving Targaryens relied heavily on Dragonstone's amplification properties to maintain their connection to their remaining dragons. This dependence would explain their reluctance to leave the island for nearly a century after the Doom. Despite having the aerial power to conquer Westeros immediately, when Daenerys Targaryen finally returns to Dragonstone, her dragon's response is telling. They seem more vital, more connected to her. This isn't merely a homecoming, it's the reactivation of an ancient magical technology designed specifically to strengthen the bond between Dragonlord and dragon. The implications extend beyond dragon control. If Dragonstone functions as a magical amplifier, it might also enhance other forms of magic. Melisandre's visions grow clearer there. The obsidian candles in the citadel relight as magic returns to the world, perhaps because Dragonstone's dormant energies are awakening again. The vast deposits of dragonglass beneath the island aren't just weapons against the others. They're components of the larger magical machine, absorbing and storing power like enormous batteries. In the wars to come, control of Dragonstone may prove decisive, not simply for its strategic location or dragonglass mines, but for its ability to amplify magical forces. Whoever holds the island, whether Daenerys with her dragons or potentially the others with their ice magic, gains access to a Valyrian superweapon hidden in plain sight, disguised as a mere fortress but actually designed to project magical power across continents. Theory 15, Quaith's prophecy, to touch the light, is to embrace fire magic's true cost. To go north, you must journey south. To reach the west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. These enigmatic words, spoken by the masked shadowbinder Quaith to Daenerys Targaryen, have been interpreted as mere geographic instructions, a convoluted path to Westeros through Eshai and beyond. But what if they're not a roadmap, but a spiritual journey? What if to touch the light doesn't refer to reaching some physical destination, but to embracing the true nature and cost of fire magic, the power that hatched Daenerys' dragons and flows in her Targaryen blood? Fire magic in George R.R. Martin's world isn't a benevolent force. It demands sacrifice, blood and life to function. Melisandre burns men alive to create shadow assassins. The glass candles of the citadel consume the life force of those who use them. The Valyrians worked blood magic, involving human sacrifice to bind dragons to their will. Even Daenerys's dragons hatched only after a funeral pyre consumed Mirri Maz. To touch the light, to fully wield the fire magic inherent in dragons and in Targaryen blood, requires understanding and accepting this terrible cost. And to gain this understanding, one must pass beneath the shadow, journey to the spiritual and metaphysical darkness where such knowledge dwells. Asshai and the Shadowlands beyond aren't merely distant locations, but the spiritual center of fire magic in the known world. In Asshai, no children are born, food must be imported, and even the strongest torches cast only feeble light. It's a place of shadows, where the boundaries between life and death, light and darkness blur and dissolve. Quaithe isn't directing Daenerys to physically travel to Asshai. She's telling her that to master the fire magic that is her birthright, to touch the light, she must metaphorically journey through the same spiritual darkness that the Shadowbinders of Asshai embrace. She must pass beneath the shadow of Death's Wing, confronting the inherent connection between life, death, and fire. This interpretation gains credence when we consider how Daenerys' journey has unfolded. Each step in her rise to power has required sacrifice. The death of her brother Viserys, the death of Drogo and their unborn son, the betrayals in Korth, the sack of Astapor. Each sacrifice has increased her power, bringing her closer to touching the light of her full magical potential. But she has yet to fully embrace the true nature of fire magic, its hunger for life, its demand for blood. She still seeks to be both the breaker of chains and the mother of dragons, liberator and conqueror, without recognizing that dragon fire cannot be truly controlled or made moral. It consumes indiscriminately. Quaithe's prophecy suggests that Daenerys' ultimate test will be whether she accepts this truth, whether she's willing to pass beneath the shadow of what fire magic truly requires. Will she embrace the darkness necessary to fully wield the light? Or will she reject it, attempting to tame the untamable? This reading transforms our understanding of Daenerys' arc. Her journey isn't simply about reclaiming the Iron Throne or even restoring House Targaryen. It's about confronting the fundamental nature of the magic that defines her lineage, magic that demands death to create power, that requires darkness to manifest light. The fire magic that hatched her dragons and makes her immune to burning comes with a price that she has only begun to understand. Each time she uses it, each time she commands her dragons to burn her enemies, she steps further beneath the shadow. Each death feeds the fire, bringing her closer to the full manifestation of her power. The true question is not whether Daenerys will reach Westeros or claim the Iron Throne, but what she will become in the process. Will she emerge from beneath the shadow as a beacon of light, having mastered fire magic without being consumed by it? Or will she become like the Shadowbinders of Asshai, powerful beyond measure but transformed by the darkness she has embraced? In this light, Quaithe's cryptic words become a warning as much as a prophecy. To touch the light of true power, Daenerys must journey through darkness that may fundamentally change her. And in that transformation lies the potential for both salvation and destruction, for herself and for the world she seeks to rule. Theory 16. The true nature of the drowned god. A pact with the deep ones. Beneath the churning waves that crash, against the Iron Islands, lurks a mystery far deeper than most Westerosi scholars care to contemplate. The Ironborn worship the drowned god, believing he grants them strength to reave and plunder, claiming what is theirs by the iron price. According to their faith, what is dead may never die, but rises again harder and stronger. Most dismiss this as primitive superstition, the religion of a harsh people shaped by harsh shores. But what if the drowned god is neither myth nor conventional deity? What if the Ironborn's religious practices reflect an ancient pact made with entities from the deepest reaches of the ocean? the mysterious Deep Ones mentioned in half-forgotten texts and whispered legends. Mester Theron's suppressed work, Strange Stone, connects the drowned god to the fathers of the Deep Ones, a queer, misshapen race of half-men sired by creatures of the salt seas upon human women. These Deep Ones bear unsettling similarities to the fish-headed gods worshipped in certain parts of Essos and to carvings found in ancient coastal ruins predating the first men. The most compelling physical evidence lies in the Sea Stone Chair, the ancient throne of the Iron Islands, made of a greasy black stone that resembles no known substance in Westeros. This same oily black material appears in the base of Hightower in Old Town, in the structures of Far Ashai, and in various coastal ruins around the world, all sites connected to legends of an ancient maritime civilization that may have preceded humanity. What if the original Ironborn, finding themselves on harsh islands with little to sustain them, made a desperate bargain with these Deep Ones? In exchange for abundance from the sea and strength in battle, they would offer sacrifices, not merely the ritual drowning we see in current practice, but true offerings of blood and lives to the depths. This would explain several peculiarities about Ironborn culture. Their practice of drowning initiates who then rise again, harder and stronger, might be a diluted form of a more ancient ritual that transformed men into something no longer entirely human. The phrase, "what is dead may never die," takes on chilling significance if the original transformation involved a form of death and resurrection facilitated by Deep One magic. The Ironborn custom of taking salt wives from captured lands might have begun as a means of providing human women to the Deep Ones, as Maester Theron suggests these entities interbred with humans. Over generations, this would have introduced Deep One blood into the Ironborn themselves, explaining their legendary hardiness and affinity for the sea. Most tellingly, consider House Greyjoy's sigil, the Kraken, and the words of other ancient Iron Islands houses, Housecod with, "though all men do despise us," hinting at a fundamental difference from other humans. House Saltcliffe with "rise again," echoing resurrection themes, or the sinister words of House Goodbrother, "beneath the sea all men are slaves." Euron Greyjoy's recent emergence as a darker version of the traditional Ironborn Reaver gains new significance in this light. His journeys to Ashai and other far lands, his claims of godhood, his interest in dragons and magic, all suggest he's rediscovered the true nature of the ancient pact and seeks to deepen it. His shade of the evening-stained lips and reported ability to control the weather hint at transformations beyond normal human capabilities. The drowned god's eternal nemesis, the Storm God, might represent forces that once opposed the Deep Ones. Perhaps the sea dragons mentioned in ancient legends, or even the dragon lords of Valyria, whose magic posed a threat to Deep One influence. This eternal conflict reflects not theological differences, but a primordial struggle between different forms of inhuman power. If this theory holds true, the implications are profound. The Ironborn aren't merely human worshippers of an invented deity, but the descendants of an ancient hybridization program, carrying within them the blood of something older than humanity. Their religious practices don't simply honor their god. They maintain a pact that has shaped their very nature over thousands of years. As Euron continues his rise to power, as strange tides are reported around the world, as ancient magics reawaken, across Westeros and Essos, the true nature of the drowned god and the depths of the pact made by the first Ironborn may finally surface, rising again, harder and stronger, from the abyssal darkness where it has waited all along. Theory 17. The Silent Sisters' True Vow, guardians of Death's forbidden law. Throughout the Seven Kingdoms, the Silent Sisters perform their solemn duties without uttering a word. These women, sworn to the service of the stranger, the death aspect of the seven, prepare noble corpses for burial or burning, collecting bones for return to ancestral crypts. Their vow of silence is explained as an act of religious devotion, a sign of their dedication to the quietest of the gods. But what if their silence serves a far more practical and urgent purpose? What if the silent sisters don't speak not merely out of piety, but because they possess knowledge so dangerous it cannot risk being spread? Consider their unique position in Westerosi society. The silent sisters are the only people who routinely interact with the dead of noble houses, families with magical bloodlines like the Targaryens, Starks, and others. They alone handle these bodies intimately, washing them, treating them with preservatives, disassembling them when necessary for transport. In the process, they observe phenomena no others witness: how different bloodlines decay, what happens to the bodies of wargs or greenseers after death, how dragon-blooded corpses respond to fire. Over centuries, the Order has accumulated observations about death that no maester could match. They've noted patterns ordinary physicians would never recognize. They've developed techniques for preserving bodies that border on the magical, and they've maintained this knowledge in perfect secrecy, passed through demonstration rather than documentation, protected by their vow of silence. Small folk whisper that silent sisters talk to the dead. This superstition contains a kernel of truth, not that they literally converse with corpses, but that they've learned to read the signs of death so intimately they can discern secrets the deceased never revealed in life. The positioning of a body after death, the pattern of decay, the color of blood in the veins, all speak volumes to their trained eyes. Their headquarters in the Great Sept of Baelor, before its destruction, contained chambers ordinary faithful never entered. Here the most senior sisters conducted research impossible elsewhere, comparing notes across generations, preserving specimens with unusual properties, testing the boundaries between life and death. Their vow of silence ensured that even if an outsider somehow gained entry, no sister could be compelled to explain what occurred within. The knowledge they protect encompasses three dangerous categories. First, the true nature of death itself, not as the end of existence, but as a transition whose boundaries can be manipulated under certain conditions. Second, the specific properties of magical bloodlines and how these manifest after death, information that could be exploited by enemies of these houses. Third, and most critically, the signs and preventative measures relating to the others and their ability to raise the dead. This last category explains why the Silent Sisters are so prominent in the faith of the Seven, a religion brought by the Endels long after the Long Night, yet seem connected to much older traditions. They preserve knowledge dating back to the original Battle for the Dawn, when humanity first learned which treatments prevented corpses from being raised by the others. Their distinctive clothes, grey robes, hoods, and silver reflective masks, serve practical purposes beyond religious symbolism. The robes are treated with specific preservatives that repel the energies of undeath. The highly polished silver masks reflect and disrupt attempts at magical control. Even their seven-pointed star pendants incorporate protection sigils disguised as religious iconography. The most telling evidence comes from their response to unusual corpses. When Tywin Lannister's body produces an unnatural stench, the Silent Sisters show no surprise, efficiently managing the problem with techniques suggesting they've encountered similar phenomena before. When they prepare Stark remains, they use specific procedures not applied to other houses, perhaps acknowledging the unique properties of Stark blood and its connection to winter magics. Their silence is not merely symbolic, but necessary. If the secrets they possess about death and its manipulation were widely known, the consequences could be catastrophic. Imagine aspiring necromancers learning the precise treatments that prevent or enable reanimation. Imagine political enemies, discovering how to exploit the magical properties of certain bloodlines after death. The Silent Sisters' vow protects the realm as much as it honors their god. In the coming war against the others, the Silent Sisters may finally reveal their true purpose. Their accumulated knowledge about preventing corpse reanimation could prove crucial when the dead begin to rise. The techniques they've preserved, the specific preservatives, the rituals dismissed as mere religious practice, may contain the forgotten keys to preventing the dead from serving the Night King. Their sisterhood represents one of the oldest and most effective intelligence operations in Westeros, hiding in plain sight, gathering information from the most intimate source possible, and preserving critical knowledge through the perfect security of silence. When the long night comes again, their whispers may finally be heard, and may help determine whether the living or the dead ultimately prevail. Theory 18. Elissa Farman's True Quest, Valyrian Dragon Lore in Asshai. The tale of Lady Elissa Farman seems straightforward at first glance. A bold noblewoman who stole 3 dragon eggs from her former lover, Princess Rhaena Targaryen, sold them in Braavos to finance the construction of her ship Sunchaser, and then sailed westward beyond the known world, never to return to Westeros. Her story is remembered as one of exploration, of seeking what lies beyond the Sunset Sea. But what if her theft of the dragon eggs and her subsequent voyage weren't separate events, but parts of a single, more complex and ambitious plan? What if Elissa Farman's true destination was never the unknown West, but the shadowed East, specifically the mysterious city of Asshai, where ancient secrets of dragon lore still lurk in the darkness? Consider the curious report from Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, who claimed to have seen Sunchaser, or a remarkably similar vessel, docked in the harbor of Asshai years after Elissa supposedly sailed west. Most dismiss this as coincidence or confusion. Surely the Sea Snake mistook another ship for Elissa's. But what if he saw exactly what he claimed? The conventional narrative that Elissa sailed west hoping to circumnavigate the globe has a fatal flaw. It fails to explain her need for dragon eggs. If exploration was her only goal, why risk everything by stealing such dangerous and valuable objects? The eggs would have been burdensome during her journey and potentially deadly if they hatched at sea, unless, of course, the eggs were the purpose of the journey all along. Asshai stands as the repository of the world's most ancient and forbidden magical knowledge. Its shadowbinders practice arts forgotten elsewhere. Its libraries contain texts predating Valyria. And crucially, its proximity to the Shadowlands, where dragons are said to have originated, makes it the perfect place to seek knowledge about hatching and controlling dragons. The dragon eggs in Elissa's possession were dormant, as all known eggs had been since the last Targaryen dragons died. The Targaryens themselves had lost much of their ancestral knowledge about dragons, how to hatch them, how to bind them, how to encourage their growth. But such knowledge might still exist in Asshai, preserved in texts dating back to the Shadow Empire or even to the Great Empire of the Dawn. Elissa's plan then takes on a new dimension, not to sail west into the unknown, but to convincingly appear to sail west while actually circling the known world to reach Asshai from an unexpected direction. This would allow her to arrive in the Shadow City with her precious cargo, without being followed by agents of the Iron Throne or others who might want to reclaim the eggs. Her background supports this theory. Elissa wasn't merely an adventurer. She was raised at Fair Isle, a center of trade and seafaring knowledge. She would have heard sailors' tales of distant lands, including Asshai. She spent years in close proximity to the Targaryens, potentially learning fragments of their dragon lore while recognizing how much had been lost. And her close relationship with Princess Rhaena gave her unique access to dragon eggs, items of incalculable value to someone planning to rediscover the secrets of dragonkind. The timing of her voyage is also significant. She departed during a period when Targaryen dragon power was declining. The once mighty beasts were growing smaller with each generation. The Targaryens themselves seemed unable to arrest this decline. For someone who understood the historical and magical significance of dragons, this situation would present both opportunity and urgency, a chance to rediscover lost knowledge before it vanished completely. If Elissa reached Asshai with the eggs, what might she have discovered? Perhaps rituals for hatching dragons, different from those the Targaryens remembered. Perhaps deeper truths about the connection between dragons and their riders. Perhaps even knowledge about the original source of dragons and their relationship to the forces of ice and fire that shaped the world's magic. We may never know the results of her quest, but its echoes potentially resurface in unexpected places. The 3 eggs she stole, black, green, and silver gold, bear striking similarities to the 3 eggs eventually given to Daenerys Targaryen. Could these be the same eggs, having traveled from Westeros to Asshai with Elissa, then across the centuries and continents to return to Targaryen hands? Elissa Farman's legacy might be far greater than a bold but failed attempt to sail west. She may have been the crucial link in preserving both dragon eggs and forgotten knowledge during the long decline of Targaryen power, ensuring that when the time came for dragons to return to the world, the means to awaken them would still exist. Bonus, Theory 1, the Winterfell Hot Springs, ancient dragon beneath the crypts. Winterfell stands as an anomaly among the castles of Westeros. While other strongholds grow cold and bitter in winter, Winterfell remains surprisingly warm. Hot springs bubble throughout the grounds, heating the castle through an ingenious system of pipes within the walls. According to legend, Brandon the Builder raised the castle deliberately over these hot springs, harnessing their warmth against the harsh northern winters. But what if these aren't natural hot springs at all? What if the heat rising from beneath Winterfell comes from something far more extraordinary? A dragon, ancient beyond reckoning, slumbering deep beneath the crypts. The evidence begins with the temperature itself. The hot springs of Winterfell maintain their warmth even during winters that last for years, when all other heat sources eventually falter. This constancy suggests not geothermal activity, which would vary based on the planet's peculiar seasons, but something that generates heat independently of external conditions. Dragons, as described throughout the lore, emanate continuous heat, even while sleeping. Their internal fires never truly die unless the creature itself perishes. A dragon in deep hibernation, a state similar to death but not quite the same, would produce steady warmth for centuries. The architecture of Winterfell offers further clues. The castle's oldest sections weren't just built near the hot springs, but deliberately centered around them. The crypts extend deep beneath the castle, far deeper than needed for mere burial purposes, with the oldest sections unreachable by current inhabitants. What if these deepest levels conceal not just ancient Stark kings, but the source of Winterfell's enduring warmth? Consider the persistent Stark connection to dragons despite their traditional enmity toward Targaryens. Jon Snow, with Stark blood, forms a bond with Rhaegal. Ancient legends speak of ice dragons in the north. The very design of Winterfell, seen from above, suggests draconic imagery. Long walls, like wings extending from a central body. Most tellingly, there are the dreams. Jon Snow and other Starks repeatedly dream of the crypts, drawn deeper than they've ever actually ventured, hearing whispers and feeling an inexplicable heat. These aren't merely anxiety dreams, but genetic memories, stirring in response to their proximity to something their ancestors knew well. This theory would explain several mysteries about House Stark and Winterfell. Why the castle has never fallen until recently, dragonfire, even from a hibernating beast, would create an invisible barrier similar to what protects Dragonstone. Why the words, "There must always be a Stark in Winterfell," carry such weight. Perhaps the dragon responds to Stark blood, growing restless without their presence. Why the direwolves returned specifically when they did, sensing the stirring of their ancient counterpart beneath the castle. The implications are staggering. If an ancient dragon slumbers beneath Winterfell, it would be fundamentally different from Daenerys's relatively young dragons. This would be a creature from the Age of Heroes or earlier, possibly an ice dragon rather than a fire dragon, with powers beyond what we've seen from existing dragons. As winter descends and the others approach, the presence of this dragon could prove decisive. Perhaps it will awaken fully, called by the combat between ice and fire occurring above. Perhaps Jon Snow or Bran Stark, with their unique abilities, will find a way to rouse it from its millennia-long slumber. Or perhaps it has been awake all along, watching through the eyes of the carved direwolves that accompany each Stark in the crypts, waiting for the moment when its fire or ice is needed once more. The hot springs of Winterfell may be not just a fortunate natural feature, but the breath of a sleeping giant, one whose awakening could fundamentally alter the coming battle for the Dawn. Bonus, Theory 2, The Last Hero and the Night's King, two sides of the same Stark. Among the many legends of the Long Night, two figures stand in apparent opposition. The last hero who sought out the children of the forest and helped end the darkness, and the Night's King, the 13th Lord Commander, who fell to darkness and sacrificed to the others. These tales are typically treated as separate stories from different eras: the Long Night and its aftermath, then the founding of the Night's Watch and the subsequent fall of the Night's King. But what if these aren't separate legends at all? What if they tell different parts of the same story? The journey of a single Stark whose desperate heroism was later remembered as monstrous villainy. The last hero, according to Old Nan's tale, ventured into the Deadlands with his companions, his horse and his dog, seeking the children of the forest and their magic to defeat the others. One by one, his companions died until he alone remained. The story breaks off before revealing exactly what happened next, but somehow this solitary hero helped bring the dawn and end the Long Night. The Night's King, according to different legends, was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who fell in love with a woman with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars, clearly describing a female other. He brought her back to the Night Fort, declared himself king and her his queen, and for 13 years performed sacrifices to the others until Brandon the Breaker and Joramun united to defeat him. After his fall, it was discovered he was a Stark, a brother to the King of Winter. These stories contain curious parallels. Both feature a Stark venturing alone into darkness. Both involve interaction with the others. Both culminate in a significant shift in the relationship between humans and the others, and both are remembered incompletely, with crucial details lost to time. What if the truth is this? During the Long Night, a Stark warrior, the last hero, lost all his companions seeking the children of the forest. At his lowest moment, near death in the frozen wasteland, he encountered not the children, but the others themselves. Faced with extinction, he made a desperate choice, not to fight, but to negotiate. He offered himself as an intermediary between humans and others, sealing this pact through union with a female other, becoming the Night's King. This pact ended the Long Night, not through military victory, but through diplomatic exchange. The wall was raised not to keep the others out unconditionally, but to mark the boundary of their domain, as agreed in the treaty. The Night's Watch was established not simply to fight the others, but to maintain communication with them and uphold humanity's end of the bargain, which included periodic sacrifices. For a time, this arrangement worked. The last hero, now the Night's King, maintained peace through his unique position, straddling both worlds. But eventually, other humans, including his own Stark kin, rejected the terms of this pact, especially the sacrifices it required. Brandon the Breaker and Joramun rose against the Night's King, destroyed his regime, and rewrote history to vilify him as a traitor rather than acknowledge him as the savior who ended the long night through compromise. This theory explains several enduring mysteries. The Night's Watch oath to be the shield that guards the realms of men never actually mentions fighting the others, perhaps because their original purpose included maintaining the ancient pact rather than just preparing for war. The insistence that there must always be a Stark in Winterfell could reference not just tradition, but obligation under this pact. The recurring phrase, "Night gathers, and now my watch begins," suggests the Watch's foundation coincided with the end of the Long Night, not its aftermath. If true, this reframes the current conflict entirely. The others aren't returning as unprovoked invaders, but as a wronged party seeking to enforce a pact broken thousands of years ago when humans betrayed the Night's King. Their advance coincides with the weakening of House Stark, the bloodline, responsible for the original agreement. Jon Snow's destiny may involve not simply fighting the others, but recognizing and potentially renewing the pact his ancestor made. His unique position, a man of the Night's Watch with Stark blood who has experienced death, mirrors that of the original last hero Night's King, potentially qualifying him to negotiate with the others once more. This would explain why the others have not simply annihilated human settlements beyond the Wall, but have acted with apparent purpose and restraint. It would clarify why they've shown specific interest in certain bloodlines. And it would provide the foundation for the bittersweet ending George R.R. Martin has promised. Not a simple victory through battle, but a painful recognition that peace requires sacrifice and that heroes and monsters often differ only in who writes the history. As we drift towards sleep, consider how these theories transform our understanding of the world of ice and fire. They reveal a deeper pattern beneath the surface narrative, a song beneath the song playing across millennia. We see ancient pacts made and broken, magical bloodlines preserved and diluted, knowledge hidden and rediscovered. We recognize that the current conflicts in Westeros aren't isolated events, but the latest movements in a symphony that began with the Dawn Age, perhaps even earlier. The Game of Thrones that occupies lords and ladies, the struggle for the Iron Throne that drives so much of the visible narrative. These are merely ripples on a deeper current. The true story lies in the ancient magics stirring beneath crypts and castles, in the bloodlines carrying powers their bearers have forgotten, in the debts and bargains made by ancestors whose names have faded from memory. As you close your eyes, imagine these hidden truths pulsing beneath the world, like the slow heartbeat of a dragon in hibernation. The Wall, Winterfell, Dragonstone, the Iron Islands, the Citadel, all conceal purposes their current inhabitants barely comprehend. All play roles in a drama scripted in an age before recorded history. The wheel that Daenerys seeks to break has been turning far longer than she knows. The game that Cersei plays so ruthlessly follows rules written in forgotten tongues. The magic returning to the world doesn't represent something new, but something very old awakening from slumber. And as darkness gathers and winter comes, as dragons soar and others advance, the song of ice and fire approaches its crescendo, a melody composed ages ago, finally reaching ears that might comprehend its meaning. In your dreams, perhaps you'll hear it too, The whispers from the crypts of Winterfell, the rustle of weirwood leaves, the distant roar of dragons long thought extinct, all harmonizing in a song as old as the world itself. Sleep now and let these theories follow you into dreams. For in dreams, like the green sight of old, we sometimes glimpse truths hidden from waking eyes, truths about ice and fire, about the long night and the dawn that follows, about the endless cycle of winter and summer that turns beneath the Game of Thrones.